It's interesting. Every Father's Day is kind of a weird day for me. Some of you know my story that my father passed away from cancer when I was a young boy, and if it wasn't for the men that my mom placed me around church and a lot of my coaches, I would not probably be here in front of you today. And so now being a father myself, going on 7 years, it's a pretty interesting time because I have to kind of navigate these waters of how do I lead and do something despite not having it modeled for me. And statistically speaking, they always say that Father's Day is one of the lowest attended church services of the year because all of the dads want to go out and do their things. And my hope and my dream is to have a church full of men of God who pursue their family and their wives in Jesus so that on Father's Day, it's actually the most well-attended Sunday because we buy into that. And so if you are a dad here in the room today or a father figure, man, I just want to say to you, keep going. You make a difference. Your presence is palpable. And I also say is if you find yourself having the bandwidth or the opportunity to come alongside a single mom or someone in your family who has a child without a father, it is desperately needed, and you can't understate the impact that you might make. And so that's why I just want my little kind of 2 cents on Father's Day. Love Father's Day. Grateful that you are all with us today. I want to start by asking you a question, though. How many of you like camping? Show of hands. How many of you enjoy camping? Okay. Now, how many of you like real camping? Like in a tent under the stars. When I say camping, I'm not talking about glamping RVs or in those like plastic igloos where it's like air conditioned, right? So one of the things, me and my buddies growing up in high school, we would go rent a campsite down by the beach. I'm from San Diego. So just like down the street from my house, but like we're going to go camp. And the reason for that is you could set up a camp, you could wake up early, you could surf all day, you could cook your food. It was great time. And so we get all of our stuff together. We go to our campsite. And when you have 4 high school boys, they don't really plan very well. And so we get to the campsite and we begin to look at each other like, okay, let's get the tent out. And it was like that Spider-Man meme, right, where they're all pointing at each other. Did you bring the tent? Did you bring the tent? And so we didn't have a tent, and so we go to the camp store, and we were able to purchase a tent. 1 2-person tent for 4 high school boys. So we set this thing up, we put the air mattresses in, we get all cozy, and then about midnight, all of a sudden we begin to hear this whoosh noise. And we're like, that's weird, there's no rain in the forecast. And so we just kind of roll over. And then about 10 minutes later, we are all drenched because we put our tent next to the sprinklers. And so we are dripping head to toe. We were young. We didn't think, we got to put the rain cover on. We had no idea what was going to happen. And so we're like rolling out of the tent as like wet dogs. And then we were going up to the campsite. We didn't bring towels. We had nothing with us. And so we just looked like disheveled boxcar children at this point. And thankfully, one of the guys helping run the thing was able to help us call our parents and to come pick us up, take us warm showers. And then we went back the next day and did it again. We just slid the tent over about 5 feet going on forward. Ever since then, like camping is not a really big thing for me. This summer, my wife and I, is our goal to start introducing our kids to camping. And so we're going to camp out on the back deck. We decided that putting them on the grass is probably too big of a step. So we're going to start on the back deck first and then progress our way out. But those of you who enjoy camping, and when I mean camping, like in a tent, real type of camping, there is 1 week of the year of the ancient Jewish tradition that you would have really loved, and that's what we're going to dive into today. It was called the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of the Booths, the Sukkoths, as they were called, in which 250,000 plus people, upwards of 1 million Jewish people, they would descend on the city of Jerusalem and they would camp. They would erect these temporary dwellings in order to remember their time in the wilderness as ancient people following God around. When God released them from their oppression, their slavery of Egypt, and then they would camp in the wilderness for 40 years every day. He would provide for their needs. And it was one of the 3 most high holy weeks that Jewish men in particular were told to participate in. They had to participate in Pentecost, Passover, and the Feast of Tabernacles. And as we dive into this story today, we're going to see something interesting. Jesus is going to go into the city of Jerusalem, his way, his timing, for his purposes, but people's opinions of him. People's opinions of Jesus are going to start to come to the surface. And so that's what we're going to dive into today is what do you do when you come face to face with your opinions? What do you do when you come face to face with your opinion? So if you have a Bible, John chapter 7. John chapter 7. If you want to join us there, man, we would love for you to join us. We are in this study through the Gospel of John. Every single week we dive into the Word of God because it has truth and power to our lives. If you are here and you're new with us, we are glad that you chose to spend your Father's Day with us. As Jennifer said, grab a gift, grab a Bible on the way out if you don't have one. We encourage you to bring your Bible so that we can take notes, we can study, we can write things in the margins to see how the Spirit might be speaking to us. And the Gospel of John is trying to solve this one big question, which is, who is Jesus? The other four Gospels, the other three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the Synoptic Gospels, give us the what, the where, the when, perhaps even the why. And John writes a few decades later to say, but let me tell you who Jesus is. Because everybody has an opinion on Jesus. Turn to your neighbor right now and say, you have an opinion. Turn to your neighbor right now and say, you have an opinion on Jesus. Because that is the truth, is that we all have an opinion about Jesus, whether fully formed or not, whether carefully articulated or not at all, you have an opinion about Jesus, and your opinion of him matters. I might even say not just your opinion of him, what you do and handle the opinion when it goes contrary to what you maybe think or feel about him matters a lot. So John chapter 7, we are picking up in verse 1. If you're there, say there, and let us dive in today. It says, after this, go ahead, circle that phrase, after this, Jesus went around into Galilee. He did not want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders were looking for a way to kill him. But when the Jewish festival of the tabernacles, you can underline that, your translation might say the feast of the booths, was near, Jesus' brothers, okay, talking about like biological brothers here, said to him, leave Galilee and go to Judea so that your disciples may see the works you do. No one wants to become a public figure who acts in secret. Since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world. For even his own brothers, get this, did not believe in him. Therefore, Jesus told them, my time is not yet here. Underline the word time. For you, any time will do. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me. You can underline that phrase, hates me. I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival, but I am not going up to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. And after he said this, he stayed in Galilee. However, after his brothers had left the festival, he went also, not publicly, but in secret. Now at the festival, the Jewish leaders were watching for Jesus and asking, where is he? And among the crowds, there was a widespread whispering about him. Some said, he is a good man. Others replied, no, he deceives the people. But no one would say anything publicly about him for fear of the leaders. So after this, John says, we're coming out of chapter 6. Jesus feeds the 5,000. He walks on water, this teaching, I am the bread of life. It's not like the next day. It's probably almost as much as a year later in which John is kind of speeding up the timeline. Because remember, John's point is not to give us a chronology of the life of Jesus. It's to build this picture. This is who you need to believe in with your life. And so he's getting ready, he's preparing for this moment that is going to then be a few months after he arrives in Jerusalem. And it says that he goes up to Jerusalem, even though he kind of tells his brother he's not going to, different sermon for a different time. He's not lying, he's not deceiving them, but he's trying to make a point. That you have misunderstood who I am. You have misunderstood what I came to do. You misunderstood my timing. I act on my Father's will, not yours. And so they go up to Jerusalem during the Feast of Booths, Sukkoth, in which there was this massive camp out. And it still goes on today. You could go to Jerusalem today to see the Feast of the Tabernacles being celebrated, and they would put together these temporary dwellings called sukkots. They're kind of like little mini tents, and they represent the time in the wilderness. And so they would kind of have some cloth. They would kind of build a basic structure, always covered in palm fronds, because that was what was available to them to create a roof. And the whole point of this feast, the Feast of the Tabernacles, the Feast of the Booths, was to do two things. Number one, it was to reflect on the sovereignty of God. To say that when we were wandering, when our ancestors were wandering, God was in control. That even when everything goes according to plan in your life, God is in control. When nothing goes according to plan in your life, God is still in control. And so that's the first thing, is they were reflecting on how God is sovereign. The second thing that they would do is they would remember his faithfulness, his goodness. That for 40 years they were in a dry, desert, barren land, but he will deliver them to the promised land, and rain, quail, manna would come. And this collectively became a feast, a festival of hope. Because when God is in control and we know that he is good and faithful, it comes together to give us hope to move forward. And so here's kind of what would happen. So they would go into the city, they would stay in these tents, and every single day there was this ritual that would happen. The high priest would take this golden pitcher and he would go down to the pool of Siloam, which would be right outside the city. And he would dunk it in, he would fill it up, and he would march it back all the way to the center of the temple. And as he was marching it back, they would shout praises. They would recount Psalm 113 through 118, the Hallel section. And then as he would pour it on to the center, the Holy of Holies, they would begin to shout the phrase, Hosanna, 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 which is this phrase that means save us. And on the seventh day of the week, after the high priest would have the golden jug filled with water, he would actually go around 7 times as a representation of the walls of Jericho. God was good and faithful, but he did things on his time, in his way, for his purposes. And then he would stand there, and a deafening silence would come across the crowd, letting that anticipation build, that sometimes waiting on God's faithfulness and his goodness requires us to listen, to seek him. And then as he would slowly pour out the water, those shouts, those praises of Hosanna would begin to just raise up and blow the city away. They would say, one scholar said that you could probably hear these chants from upwards of 3 miles away. And so here's Jesus. He's in the midst of this festival, but we learn something interesting first, is that Jesus had some brothers. Some of you are like, wait a second, Jesus had some brothers. Yeah, the Gospel of Matthew actually tells us that Jesus had sisters as well. Can you imagine if Jesus was your sibling? Growing up must have been awful, right? Not only was he your older brother, but every single time you did something wrong, your mom would have been like, I just wish you'd be more like Jesus. Come on, Jesus takes out the trash the first time I ask him, not the third. Come on, Jesus doesn't hit his siblings. Jesus doesn't get angry. Could you imagine having Jesus as one of your siblings? It would drive you absolutely mad. So it makes sense that they do not really believe him. Because let me just tell you, there is one person, there's hopefully even but one person in particular in this planet who, if I tried to tell you, which I'm not, but if I tried to tell you, I'm the Messiah, God sent me to save the sins, you should listen to me, no one comes to the Father except through me, the number one person who would be like, yeah, that ain't it, is my sister. Because I've hit her before, right? I've yelled at her. We've gotten in fights and arguments. She'd be like, there is no way, okay? And yet Jesus' siblings, kind of we can understand, had this trouble believing in him because of that sibling rivalry. And it's funny, they began to say, if you're so popular, Jesus, you've been doing this show in the small city of Galilee, go up to Jerusalem, show everybody your powers and show them what they have to do. Little Messiah boy, let's see what you got. I love it how the Living Bible puts it, verse 4. Look at what the Living Bible says, as his brother is saying, is you can't be famous when you hide like this. If you're so great, prove it to the world. They're kind of coaxing him. They don't really believe. And Jesus says, I'm going to go. But he goes for his purpose, on his timing, to do things his way. And what this chapter began to show us is that there's many different people with many different opinions on who Jesus is. And oftentimes it's because we have opinions of Jesus that misunderstand his timing, his way, his purpose. His brothers say, go be popular, go be famous, go be powerful. And he says, actually, that's not the way I do things. I'm going to go live and die as a suffering servant. You've misunderstood my way. Go up now, bro. Don't delay. If you're really the king of the universe, if you're really the Yeshua Messiah, go up. Let everybody see you and experience. Why are you waiting? Just go show it. My time has not yet come because my timing depends on the Father and not what the rest of the world feels I should do. Go, rally your crowd, become this influence, reap that praise, become this political leader, start a revolution. Come on, use me. And he says, no, my purpose is actually to bring truth. And that truth is going to cause people to hate me in this life. But the truth will set them free. And here's my point this morning, is that everyone has an opinion on the way, the timing, and the purpose of Jesus. Every single person has an opinion on the way, the timing, and or the purpose of Jesus. Maybe it's acutely formed and there's a reason they have this opinion. Or perhaps they don't know why they have this opinion. They're just going along with the currents and streams of culture. You see, when it comes to opinions, oftentimes we draw very strong lines about things. We can get stuck on things and we don't want to see things a different way. We don't want to break out of them, big or small. You have opinions on probably a lot of things throughout life. Like if you work for somebody, chances are you have an opinion that if you were the boss, you would do things differently. You knew how the better things to do. In your marriage, you probably have an opinion on what your spouse should or shouldn't be doing. You have opinions on the way that the kids should be raised, educational systems. And arguably the most contentious thing we have opinions on is toilet paper. Over or under? Fights break out. I don't know if people get divorced over this, but man, like it's a real thing. So we're just going to settle it right now, okay? All the people who put it under, stand up so we can pray for you, okay? I'm just kidding. Do you fold it? Do you crunch it, right? You know, what's the proper technique? It's funny, we draw very strong opinions about menial things in life, do we not? Let me give you a couple examples, and so you can just shout your answer out to this. Okay, here's the first one. When it comes to a hot dog, okay, does ketchup belong on a hot dog? Yes or no? Just shout it out. Just shout it out. Yeah. A couple weeks ago, I went to Wrigley Field for the first time. One of my friends was gracious enough to bring me and my son Jude along, and so, I'm up in Chicago, never been to really Chicago before. Chicago, the Windy City, and so I go to get a hot dog, and the guy's like, you want everything on it? And so, I was like, absolutely, load it up. So he does the mustard and the dill pickles and the onions and the relish, and then he hands it to me, and I looked at him, and I said, do you have any ketchup? And he told me to leave. No, I'm just kidding. He didn't do that. He was super chill, but you could tell he was just like, I don't know, you must not be from around these parts, right? It's a very Midwestern thing. Here's the second one, okay? How do you pronounce this? All right, peanut butter people, where are you at? Where are my peanut butter people, right? It's Jif. I think it's really pronounced GIF, so, you can be learned there. And here's one I have a strong opinion on, but I won't die on this hill. But when it comes to audiobooks, is this actually reading or not? Yes or no? Shout it out, people, right? A lot of you shouted yes. You're wrong. I'll pray for you. You are consuming the content and the intellect, but you're not reading, right? But it's all good. It's all the same. When it comes to opinions, they're super easy to have. Yet if we don't know why we have them, they can become very dangerous. Even more so, and this is the point for the rest of the morning I want us to maybe sit with, is how does an opinion get changed for you? I heard it said this week that a dead fish can go with a current, but it takes life and determination to swim upstream. This crowd, his own brothers in this moment, have a very strong opinions about Jesus that chances are they're just parroting what everybody else thinks. You're not really the Messiah, you're just one of us. He's just a good man. No, he's not a good man. He's a deceiver of people. Verse 20 that we'll study in a couple of weeks says he's actually demon-possessed. There's all these opinions about Jesus, but nobody probably knows why they actually have it. They just hear it and they like it, or it feels good, or it sounds right, and so they just swim along like a dead fish with the rest of the current. And Jesus says, no matter your opinion about me, Jesus' opinion about himself is the true way we need to view him. And we have very strong opinions about Jesus today. You might be here today because you have a very strong opinion about Jesus. Maybe you don't have an opinion about Jesus and you're trying to figure out what your opinion ought to be. Maybe over time in the last few weeks or months or years, your opinion has shifted over time. Some people think that Jesus is just a good moral teacher. Some people's opinion of Jesus, he's just a historical figure. Some people's opinions that all religions lead to the same place. And Jesus says, this is why they hate me. I'm not just a good man. I'm not just a good moral teacher. I'm not demon-possessed. I'm not a deceiver. I'm here to give you the truth, and the truth will give you life, but your opinion about me has to be willing to change to the truth about me. And I want us to think about this. Fast forward, okay? So 250,000 Jews in the city of Jerusalem. This whole festival is going on. Jesus' opinions about him are widespread. Fast forward a year. At this point, Jesus would have died on the cross, risen from the grave, ascended back to heaven. You fast forward a year, guess what is happening in the city of Jerusalem still? The Feast of the Tabernacles, the Feast of the Booths. Yet, something peculiar would be noticed, is that there is going to be less huts this time. There's going to be less booths this time. His brothers, who didn't believe him, fast forward a year, are now following him, leading churches, writing letters, and potentially being willing to die for him. Yet these same people going with the current, the religious leaders have dug their heels in and they have kept their opinions the same. They're still sitting in their booths, waiting, hoping that the Messiah will come. You see, I believe this is where Satan wins the day, is when he gets people so engrossed and blinded by their opinions that they don't know why they have them. Maybe it feels personally good or it's beneficial to them, but they become unwilling to change. And that's where the enemy of the gospel of Christ says, the more I can get people to be strong on opinions and unwilling to change, I have them right in my crosshairs. That the more stuck in the mud they get, the more hostile they become, the more angry they present themselves over opinions, I'm winning, Satan says. So let me ask you this question. Maybe you thought about it, maybe you haven't, maybe there's somebody in your life that the Spirit is bringing to your mind, but let me just ask you this question, is that when Jesus doesn't match my opinion of him, who changes? When your opinion of Jesus doesn't match who he presents himself to be, who changes? Who changes? Because do we not have this mentality that Jesus is someone that we get to kind of curate? Well, I like my Jesus uses these kind of words, but I don't like the harsh words. I like the soft Jesus, the meek Jesus, but I don't like the strong Jesus. Like, the dude was jacked. He carried a cross up 3 miles of a hill. The dude was a raw man. He would go to the religious political leaders and call them out in public without shame. But we don't like that view of Jesus sometimes. It doesn't seem nice or kind or compassionate. And Jesus says, I don't care. They're going to hate me because this is the truth. What about when Jesus calls you to forgive that person you don't want to forgive? To love your neighbor as yourself. To serve your spouse as you would see Jesus serve the church. To give back to him, to serve him, to love without bounds. What happens when your opinion of Jesus doesn't like who he really is? Who changes? You know, when I think about this, sometimes I think about what happens to us when there's an opinion on the way we want things to be done and how we sometimes respond. It reminds me of this little video here. Check it out.
Strike one. Dad, that wasn't a strike. That was you swung. Oh, slow balls. Slow ball. Hey.
I think our opinion of Jesus sometimes is like that. He does something we don't like and we go back to him, hey, that's not fair. I don't like that. Make it easier. Make it softer for me. And Jesus said, that's not why I came. You see, the crowds of Jesus, they wanted different timing, different ways, a different purpose. They wanted miracles, comfort. They wanted him to have political power. They wanted it now and they wanted it forevermore. And then when Jesus proved himself, some opinions changed and other opinions different. Some were still sitting in booths a year later with their arms crossed, hell-bent on not ever changing their view because they didn't like how Jesus presented himself. While others were now living and dying. Their lives were transformed. They were transforming the world. They were showing radical hospitality. These house churches were popping up everywhere, you name it. And so my question for us is how do we become more like Jesus' siblings who had an opinion and it was changed, not the religious leaders? And I think it's what this feast is all about, is to remember and to reflect on the goodness and the faithfulness of Jesus. But I also want you to know is that you, by the power of the Spirit in you, if you're a follower, disciple of Jesus, you have the chance and you have the opportunity to help other people's opinion of him change. And I believe that the most fundamental way in which we do that is through our actions. The most fundamental way in which we do that is through our actions. That people's opinion of Jesus most often changes because of our actions. Not our arguments, not our intellectual prowess. I'm not saying we don't know what we believe. I'm not saying we check our brains at the door. I'm not saying we don't enjoy apologetics for the right person, the right time. But Jesus even said it is our actions of disciples that will change opinions about him. It is the way that you lead yourself, the way that you lead your family, the way in which you go about your life, your neighbors, everything that you do has the opportunity to change people's opinion about Jesus. That's why Jesus said that they will know you are my disciples by the way in which you love one another. In Jesus' great commission, he says, go, teach them, but teach them to obey as you have and baptize them into the name of the Father. And so for some of you this morning, this is really, really good news. Because you want to live on mission with Jesus. You believe you have people in your life that you want to help them change their opinions about Jesus so that they may know his transforming love and his truth and his power. But you don't have a hard time putting words together. You have a hard time piecing things together, and they have really good arguments sometimes, and they have really good thoughts, and you don't really know how to address them. Let me tell you, your actions will speak louder than words. Some of you, it's the exact opposite. You don't like that idea that your actions matter because you like to hide behind a keyboard. You like to hide behind a screen because you think it does something. And all it does is it feeds into the algorithm and it creates arguments, and you just think you can hide behind yelling and shouting, and it will get you absolutely nowhere. Because it is our actions that prove that we have been loved and redeemed and transformed. Let me tell you about a quick story as I close my time with you this morning. About 5 years ago, I was discipling this college student who wasn't from this part of the state, and he was going to the U of I, and gave his life to Jesus. And this dude was he was getting it. He was hungry. It was all there. And I remember we were having coffee, and he was getting ready to go home for Christmas break, and he said to me, he said, Eric, what do I do about my family who doesn't believe? He said, I want them to know Jesus. I want them to accept him. They have these, my words, but they have these strong opinions, and I don't think they're ever going to change. And he said, so what can I say to them? What verses can I read to them that'll change their heart and change their mind? I remember thinking about it, and I said, well, first of all, I would maybe understand, do they actually know why they don't believe in him or not? But then I remember, I said to him, you want to know how you can have the biggest impact? Is when you go home, make your bed. When you go home, take out the trash without being prompted. When you go home, mow the lawn. When you go home, offer to do errands. When you go home, encourage your mom, your dad, your siblings like never before. Because they will notice something is different about you. And then when that question, hopefully, prayerfully, inevitably becomes, what got into you? There's your opportunity. The Spirit of Jesus. He has transformed my life to the point in which I now feel led and called to love others as myself. So as we continue to worship this morning, as we prepare for our time in communion, maybe you're here this morning and you're a dad in the room or you're a father figure. Your actions matter. Your actions set the example of what an opinion about Jesus looks like. The way you treat the mom matters. The way in which you live out your faith matters. Do they see you praying? Do they see you reading your word? Do you wrestle and encourage them to be in church? Do you make it a priority? Do you show what it looks like to serve? Or do you just go about your life hoping that they will figure it out for themselves? If you're married in the room, if you're single in the room, if you're alone in the room, when you have these moments of dryness, when you feel like you're just kind of wandering around in the wilderness, how can I even think about living for Jesus when I feel dead on the inside, when I feel lost, when I feel just empty? Remember the Feast of the Tabernacles. God is in control. He is sovereign over everything in life. He is very aware of who you are and what you're going through, but also remember that He is good, that He is faithful. Rain will come again. Manna and bread will come down and it will nourish your soul. And I think when we remember and reflect on the goodness and the faithfulness of God, it gives us that hope to continue to move forward in who Jesus says He is and who He says we are in Him, so that we may love and care and witness to the world like never before. Would you pray with me as we continue to go into a time of worship through communion? If you hadn't had the chance to grab the elements, you can grab those as a timer comes on the screen. The cracker represents the body of Christ broken for us, and the juice represents the blood of Christ shed before us. And it is that work, that action, that does a transforming work within us. To not just say we know who Jesus is, but to live as His disciple. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we surrender our opinions about You, our opinions of the things You call us to. We praise You for Your sovereignty. We remember Your goodness. Therefore, give us courage, give us hope to follow and to celebrate You with our lives. And Jesus, if there's an opinion about You that we need to surrender, may You reveal it to us. If there's somebody in our life who we know, we love them, we want them to know You, may we work diligently to show Your love, and when the moment comes, to share that good gospel truth. That all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, but those who confess with their mouth that Jesus is Lord, they are renewed, they are made steadfast for a life everlasting. Give us courage. Amen.